Hello, this is Sheila Bender, and you are listening to In Conversation, discussions on writing and the writing life. Today we have with us in our studio local Port Townsend resident and writer, Vicki Sutherland Horton. She writes of commercial fishing life. She grew up in a commercial gill netting family and holds a master's in science education. She often reads her poetry and short stories at Astoria, Oregon's Fisher Poets and Port Townsend's Fisher Poets. Vicki is a sixth-generation Washingtonian and is currently working on a memoir about her experiences while commercial fishing with her father and the ensuing struggles after the Bolt decision, a 1974 court ruling allocating 50% share of salmon and steelhead harvest to tribal fishermen. She is currently also working with an organization called Global Ocean Health. Welcome to the program, Vicki.
Thank you, Sheila, for having me. This is exciting.
It's exciting for me, too. As I told you before we went on the air, I came to Seattle in 1972, and one of the very first political things that I was aware of here was the Bolt decision and how it was affecting commercial fishing. So we'll get to that in our talking. I first want to congratulate you on two wonderful publications you've told me about. One is, in recent times, an honorable mention in the Writer's Digest Fiction Contest, a national yearly contest. And I noticed as I was reading your bio that you write fiction based on growing up here in a gill netting family. And also your work appears in the Alaska Fisherman's Journal. Also pretty recently, fall edition 2016. So we'll get to talking about your activity in writing and how it's influenced by your growing up and also by your career. Let's start with the Fisher Poets. Who are they? And I know they have a website you can tell us about. And how did you get involved? And how does that affect your writing?
Fisher Poets first began 20 years ago on a dock in Alaska, where two of my favorite people, Holly Hughes, John Broderick, and there may have been another, I can't remember, I'm not sure, said, you know, we need something like cowboy poets have. Fishermen are certainly writers. And so they decided, and John took this on, where now we have 110 this year Fisher Poets showing up. And it happens in Astoria, the 3rd February of every year. And
wait, the 3rd of February?
I'm the 3rd weekend of February, thank you. I got started through my sister, who was also a writer, who was a friend of Holly's, and she said, you ought to come down. And I did, and it's been that way for the last 10 years. I've gone every year.
Does that mean you go with work that you've written to perform?
Yes. Every Fisher Poet has to qualify, but it's extremely easy. It's hand in a piece of work and have you been part of the fishing industry. One of the things I like about Fisher Poets is it keeps me writing, keeps me invested. It's such a great event that I don't want to not go because, quite frankly, I connect with people that I never would be able to connect with any other time. People that knew my father, people that come up to me and say that they knew him and will tell me a story about him. That's Fisher Poets. Is there anything that I missed?
Well, what happens in Port Townsend or more locally?
Oh, that's a really good point. The Fisher Poet movement is starting to evolve, and there is 3 or 4 now that are happening. Whether they're going to be long-term, I don't know, but there's been one in Olympia. There's been one in Port Townsend. They called it a Seafarers Festival. It was this last November at the old alcohol plant. And the owners of the old alcohol plant are very serious about keeping that going. And he, by the way, is also a Fisher Poet. So we're hoping that next November there will be then even another one. But there's been one out at the ocean. I can't think of any others right now, but I'm really pleased. Oh, and there's been some in Seattle as well. But they're usually one-time events.
So these are readings?
These are readings. And these are Fisher Poet readings.
The general public is invited?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so for those of us locally here in Port Townsend and the peninsula and even in Seattle, what should we be watching for then?
You should be watching for, I can specifically say, the old alcohol plant next November. How to find out about them. There's actually a Fisher Poet Facebook page where they're starting to manage that now, and they are posting where some of these new venues are popping up, and we'd love to have you come.
It sounds exciting.
It is.
And,
it is.
Is the poetry all about water and fishing and boats?
Absolutely. It's poetry. it's prose, and it's also music. There's quite a few people that bring and have small bands and that are all very nautical. You hear it all. You hear about being nauseous. You hear about... One of my favorite stories is somebody was talking about wrapping one of their crewmates in tin foil and pretending that he was some sort of radar magnet. I mean, it's just whatever works.
Life on the water.
Life on the water, right.
It sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Is there any presence at the Wooden Boat Festival here?
There was last year, and then it didn't happen this year.
Perhaps in the future.
Yeah, perhaps in the future. I did read last year. It was great.
Thank you. It sounds fun. Fun to know about. It says in your bio that a lot of your writing is about growing up the daughter of Gil Netter and how the Bolt decision affected commercial fishermen. And I know that there are some trying moments in your childhood and teenage years because of that. And how is that going in your writing, and how do you approach that?
First of all, the Bolt decision didn't happen until I was 26. So my growing up here in Port Townsend was absolutely idyllic. I mean, I have this lens on it that probably not totally realistic, but we grew up a commercial fishing family here in Port Townsend. A lot of my writing draws upon that experience because I'm able to talk about being out on the boat and what it means to be intimately on a commercial fishing boat. And I love to tell stories about being on fishing boats. We did birthday parties, we did camping trips, you name it. So I have that real tight sense of what it means to be a commercial fisherman. And then what happened when the Bolt decision occurred is I was newly married, and there you start to kind of separate. But I did fish with Dad more as just a time to be with him. And that was actually my last fishing with him because of the Bolt decision and some of the dangers actually that started to happen.
So some people listening have probably not heard too much about the Bolt decision. So maybe a little brief talk about that, and then the dangers, and then how they're entering into your writing.
Yeah. Okay. So the Bolt decision happened in 1974. Judge Bolt made now see here, I don't know what the word is. Are we talking law? Are we talking? But it was mandated that 50% of the harvest went to tribal members and 50% of the harvest went to non-tribal members. That in of itself is a horrific racial statement, and I struggle a lot with that. I don't anymore because I really realized that this was such an imposed thing that how could it not be racial? But that's been an issue. In my writing, I've been working on that through that. But the Bolt decision was mismanaged. And there were state agencies, there were federal agencies that were in conflict about what to really do about it. My father was arrested at one point in time. There were many people arrested. I want to lay claim to that and honor those people. But my father made it a media event where he said, okay, there's fish coming from Canada that aren't local fish or are regulated by Canadian and American or U.S. agreements. Why can't we fish for them? We meaning non-tribal members. So he announced to the media, and he was very strongly connected to the media, said, I'm going to do a fish-in. And he caught 6 fish and was arrested, and that was federal. But what also happened is that a friend of mine, Buck Malloy, was a fisherman at the time that my dad was a fisherman, and he remembers being arrested. And I'm not sure it was a state law or a federal law that he was arrested because of that, but then having it be overturned in the court because the state or the federal didn't agree with whatever he was talking about. So
this is so confusing.
It is confusing.
A judge makes a legal decision, but we're talking about the ocean and fish. And so what I was imagining was there's so many fish caught per season and the numbers divide up, not fish coming from Canada or not coming from Canada. How was it supposed to be divided 50-50?
I think that's a great question. I don't know. I know that they knew what a total number of fish should be caught, and they do a tally, and then they can tell when a run is coming through, whether or not it is meeting what last year's run was, and therefore, okay. And whenever you sell a fish, that fish is recorded in a numbers kind of a way. They would know. Right. But Some of this, Sheila, I'm not totally clear on.
So back to the writing, you're using your writing as a way of investigating how the decision was made and what the impact was, and how it was perhaps mismanaged, but also what it means to you in terms of a racial statement. And it seems like a very hard thing, because
it's a terrible hard thing.
Very hard thing. And there you were growing up on one side of it, and what happens. And all these years later, do you even know what happens? I mean, what happens now?
As far as the Bolt decision, it is basically law, and there are very few opportunities for non-tribal members. I will also say that I think it happened at a time when the fishing resource was really starting to be limited.
Dwindle.
There were fewer, dwindle, exactly. And so there were many complicating factors.
So it sounds like a rich territory for writing, and heartbreaking, no matter which side you're on.
Yes.
And one of those things that kind of is getting lost in the history of our area, as we don't think about the fishing industry as much.
And you asked me a question a while ago about what this means as memoir writing, and I find that it's so multi-layered. And yes, it is a way of recording history. It is a way also of digging through and finding more salient information about, that happened. I didn't realize that. And then that opens up a whole nother door. It's the relationship with my father. It's understanding the trauma of what it means to lose a parent when you're a young adult. That's also
because he died.
He died accidentally and died fishing, and he died going out on a night. Well, let me back up a little bit. Fishermen are given so many days or nights, depending on what kind of fish they do, to fish. And so let's say that you're fishing in the Strait of Juan de Fuca area, and you can only fish a certain area, and you can only fish Monday and Tuesday. That's it. So if you don't go out, you're not going to catch any fish. You're not going to maintain your livelihood. So Dad went out on a day. He only had one or two. First of all, I'm going to back up again. This was at the end of the Bolt decision. The Bolt decision was already sort of winding down, and he decided that he was going to try to make and eke out a living. He was approaching his retirement era, and he kind of knew that he probably wasn't going to have to be maintaining a family anymore. So he went fishing on a night. It was November 3rd, and I always mark a storm. The 1st of November is always a huge storm. Well, he was in that storm, and his boat sank off of Maristone. I also believe that because of the Bolt decision, he was distracted, he was depressed, his boat wasn't top-notch. There were things wrong mechanically with his boat. He wasn't paying attention to his safety gear. And it was just for lack of a better word, or lack of a better phrase, a perfect storm.
You are listening to KPTZ 91.9 FM, Port Townsend. In case you just joined us, you are listening to In Conversation with Sheila Bender, discussions on writing and the writing life. Today, Sheila is talking with Port Townsend writer Vicki Horton about the influence of the Fisher poets on her writing and publishing.
When we write from the things that are devastating and move forward, and it seems very important that you're writing this story, and also very brave.
Yeah.
And so how do you tackle it, the memoir writing?
In small bits. It's like eating that elephant one bite at a time. And I will choose an event, and I have pieces of this memoir, a stack 2 inches high, that are stories of his death, stories of his arrest, stories of the court scene, stories of him in prison. And now what I'm trying to do is take all those and insert myself into the story. It's easy to write a story about somebody else, and now I'm trying to be more present to who I am in regards to this story. So I cry a lot.
I need to take a deep breath to hearing about this and hearing about your project. So the stories that you've been publishing, are they some of these bits and pieces?
Yes, they are. Yes.
Did you want to read something for us?
No.
Oh, not yet.
Not yet. Not yet.
Are you going to read from more current work, or?
I'm going to read. Actually, I want to practice my Fisher poets.
Oh, good.
Story.
Okay, well, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
As writers in memoir, lots of people want to write someone else's memoir.
It's not a memoir, is it?
Yeah. I think that when we write someone else's memoir, we really are writing our memoir about them and the impact of their lives on us. Whether it's just our journey to figure out what happened or to learn more about them. So I applaud your effort to insert yourself and let the reader know your journey through all of this and its impact on you. So,
Thank you.
That said, maybe we should turn to the Fisher Poets. And you want to, did you say practice?
I have 3 pieces that I'm not going to read them all, of course, that I'm putting together for this coming Fisher Poets event. This is I don't know. I call it poetry prose. You probably have a very sophisticated word for it.
How about prose poem?
How about prose poem? Okay. This is called North Beach. It was at North Beach, after Dad's funeral, where Mother and I said our final goodbye to Dad. We watched Mother in her 40s, and I just married, from the shore as a gillnet fishing boat, aptly named the Sea Angel, carried Dad's body westward toward the Washington coast, and even further beyond the continental shelf to bury him at sea. On this same beach, during our growing up years, Mother would have piled us into our battered 56 Chevy to make the trip to this then isolated beach to watch as our fishing boat, the Vicki, and Dad round the Point Wilson lighthouse. Here we could see in the dimming light our boat purposefully enter the Strait of Juan de Fuca. It is here that as a child I watched as my mother stood barefoot at water's edge, surrounded by sleeping barnacle-encrusted rocks as tiny crabs scuttled away. The biting wind caused her white skin to blush red. The corners of her coat flapped. Her blue scarf danced merrily about her face as she raised her chin, delighted to meet and blend with, as I love to do, the rush of air. I yearned to know with certainty that when she faced the waves, she also heard the other world sounds that I often hear. Windswept voices, percussive rhythmical waves, gulls mewing. I regret that we never talk about the power of the sea. As was our family custom, we watched from the shores our town's small fleet of fishing boats round one by one the point of land where the Point Wilson lighthouse stands. These working boats, no more than 35 feet long, built to endure heavy Pacific Northwest winter weather, were each skippered by usually one man. The second boat to come into view was our family's boat, the Vicki, an earthen gray, hard-working gillnetter. She entered the Strait of Juan de Fuca where smooth inland waters met watery peaks, making the bow of the Vicki shudder and dip. At the same time, stepping into the frigid water, my mother sought a better view of the Vicki's slow rolling progress. The boat came parallel to North Beach, and a tiny figure stepped from the cabin, grasped a rope that was strung from the wheelhouse to the stern to make his way, hand over hand, toward the back of the boat. Decades later, I walk this same beach to greet beach walkers in feather-filled coats, and I pet their happy dogs, thinking of how my mother waved her scarf over her head, watching the Vicki round Middle Point to motor out of view.
Thank you, Vicki. Feather-filled coats, petting their dogs, happy. And there you are with this intense memory of your mother, her scarf, a beautiful use of imagery. And so I think you could call it poetic prose if you want to.
Okay.
Or you could call it several prose poems embedded in a piece of prose. But
Thank you, O writing teacher.
it tells a wonderfully deep and important story. So you have said that one of your several interests in Fisher Poets is it keeps you writing because you've got all this to share. I know that you also belong to a writing group that meets more than just a few times a year.
Right.
So how does that help you keep writing?
I love my writing group. They challenge me, and that's why I love them. They are brilliant writers, brilliant women, and I think what you're hearing is my respect for them. And they're happy when I show up. And so there's this collective thing between us all that we energize each other to keep writing. It's a commitment. We've been together now almost 4 years, and it was after a workshop that we all took with you that we said, we're going to stay together and do this. We meet once a month. And I laughingly tell everybody that I'm the weak link in the group. I mean, I tell you, they are so amazing that I feel like I learn such a tremendous amount from them.
I think that one of the privileges of being in a wonderful writing group is the feeling of safety to show new or raw material. And I personally believe that the earlier you feel that you can part with the material and show it to a group that you trust, the faster or further the jump start goes, the more help you get. There's something about early drafts that we don't trust. And sometimes what we do as writers is take away the really good stuff because we don't trust it.
Interesting.
And yet, if we're willing to show it, we find out just how wonderful that stuff is, what we should do with it, as opposed to just take it away.
Right.
Do you get that experience?
I do.
Yeah. So it takes, I wouldn't call you the weak link. I think that people who have the courage to show things that they're not sure are ready actually have a lot of strength in the writing.
Nice.
But it is nice to admire the people that you're working with, and I'm sure they admire your work too.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So
it's been a great journey.
So having trusted readers whose writing you enjoy, as well as they have enjoyment of yours, a regular schedule of meeting, and anything else that you think makes a good ingredient in a writing group?
Complete honesty in the criticisms. Sometimes it's hard to listen to it, but I'm going to get their honest opinion of something.
So what's an example, if you have one, of something that was difficult to listen to?
Somebody was trying to push on me a little bit about my grief for my father and how I was expressing it. Was I really expressing it authentically? Is that really where I was going? And I still haven't completely come to grips with what was happening there, but it's kept it front and center in my thinking.
Did they think you weren't really evoking it?
I think so. Holding me accountable is very valuable to me.
But in the end, it's your decision. That's what you're saying. You're holding it front and center, but it's you writing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. We sometimes think we've put things on the page that a reader goes, well, sounds a little bit like it's not quite fully on the page. On the other hand, you do have to come at the truth slant as writers to allow readers and ourselves to truly experience it rather than just be told something.
I like that word, the truth slant.
Yeah, that's an Emily Dickinson
Is
quote, getting her lines completely. But if we were to tell the truth, blurt it out, it's too bright to see. So we have to come at it slant so that we can actually handle it. But sometimes I suppose we come at it too slant.
And then it's obscure.
Or horizontal.
Right.
Yeah, so I think everyone who wants to work with a writing group is very lucky to find a group with that kind of commitment. And that was one of the words you used, a commitment to keep it going, to sustain it. And I take it that means even if all the members can't attend each month,
it still happens.
Yeah.
Right. I think another thing that they do a very nice job of is they celebrate my strengths. And that is actually evolving more and more. And one of the strengths that I'm starting to own is an ability to be descriptive of the environment in a really rich way, in a poetic kind of a way.
I could hear it in the piece you read.
And I want to do more of that.
Yeah.
And they'll go, there it is, Vicki, again. And so,
well, that is the way of coming at it slant. When we see your mother waving her scarf, we feel grief. We feel the passage of time
Exactly.
without you having to say something.
Yeah.
I'm very happy that you read that. And
thank you.
Did you bring anything else to read?
Well, I did,
well,
but
we have time.
Okay, this is for fun. This is what's in a name. Dinghy, rowboat, skiff. They're the same. And there's bow picker, troller, trawler. But give a boat a name and something transcendent happens. The fishing boat flotilla includes the names Sea Sprite, Sea Angel, and Sea Gem. A glimpse maybe into those boat owners' hopes? Vickeline, Bittern, Lady Lou, like their sisters, provided durability and some comfort as they muscle through foul weather. And the whimsical, Ballerina, Vampy, Cinderella, and Mary Maid, surely they are good boats where skippers smiled. The big catches went to boats with names Reality, Stealth, and Haste. Like superheroes, they must have had X-ray vision, be very fast-paced. But all this makes me pause, and I wonder what the fishing world would be like if the boats were named Bob or Brad or Mark, or better yet, Peace or Plentiful or Gratitude.
Thank you. Well, I know what I want to do when I'm done in the studio, and that would be to take a walk through Boathaven.
I love doing that.
Thank you for those names. And as you read, Vicki, does that have your name in it?
That is our boat's name, and it was named after me.
Because you're a favorite, a firstborn?
I was a firstborn. Our family life was on that boat.
Yeah.
And
oh, that's wonderful. So I want to wish you all the luck in the world of knitting your several pieces together and getting the separate pieces published. And I want to repeat to everybody to look for Fisher Poets on Facebook. And I do think they have a .org website, fisherpoets.org.
They do.
It might not have the same information. So, Vicki, thank you so much for sharing your history and your writing.
Thank you.
In Conversation is produced by Sheila Bender and edited by Charlie Fleischman.